Die Herrschaft des alten Shogunats ist vorüber!
Ich habe jetzt hier den Kieran von Creative Assembly, denn ich habe gerade schon ein bisschen was von Shogun 2 sehen können und ich freue mich jetzt, denn jetzt kann ich ihn endlich mit meinen Fragen bombardieren. Kieran, we just saw Shogun 2. How come you decided to do a second Shogun?
Well, it's a second Shogun in as much as it's a kind of upgrade, reimagining, and a proper reconstruction of the first. So when we actually created Total War 10 years ago, we started out with the Japanese feudal period being the kind of game we wanted to make. So when we first decided Total War as a series, i.e. turn-based and real-time, we thought the perfect time period for that was feudal Japan. With 10 years worth of technology and 10 years worth of development, it seems like the perfect time to go back to do the game we wanted to make right at the beginning.
Total War has been very successful. Rome Total War, a lot of people know. Napoleon Total War, it's great games. But see, I'm wondering why you went back to Shogun, because does maybe the Japanese tradition and the culture, do you think that also appeals to a broader mass of people that are going to buy the game? Because, you know, something like Rome seems more graspable for people in Europe and everything.
Sure. Actually, it's really interesting you say that, because when we did the first Shogun, Japanese culture was nowhere near as widespread as it is now. So, you know, awareness of proper Japanese history and stuff was very, very vague, even you know, in places like Europe. Obviously, in the years that have followed, you know, kind of like the Japanese culture, manga, the rise of, you know, of kind of like, I guess you'd call it like Japanese cartoons, Japanese films, Japanese language, you know, media, all of this kind of stuff has had an effect on the West, and an awareness of Japanese culture is much, much richer. But in terms of the kind of game we want to make, there are two answers to this, right? The kind of, the proper stoic, you know, kind of reasoned development answer is that it offers us a genuinely exciting and cool period to cover. It's very, very interesting in terms of the history and the dynamics. Total War games have to fulfill several criteria to be a Total War game. It has to be a period in which a lot of different people could have come out as the leaders, right? So feudal Japan in that period is a time when lots of different clans could have won if different things had happened, right? It also has to be a time of great military change. So technology and kind of armament has to change as the game progresses, leaving the player to fight very different battles at the end to what they were fighting at the beginning. And again, Japan in that kind of Sengoku Jedi area is very, very key to that. The second reason is a lot more basic, to be honest, and it's because it's freaking cool. Ninjas and samurai are just awesome. It's something that everybody can get around. You know, it's good fun stuff. It's a great media, and it's a really, really good cultural pot to draw from.
You just showed us a presentation of the game, and you said you have less units and less different units in the game now. You said about 30 different units. How come you decided to tone it down a bit?
Well, this is an interesting one again as well. I mean, again, there's two reasons behind this. One, it's historically accurate. There weren't hundreds of different unit types in feudal Japan. You didn't have like the 112th regiment of so-and-so lancers or something like you did in Europe, you know. Japan is a very, very different type of society with a very kind of more finite set of warrior fighting skills. And that basically lets us do two things. One, for players who haven't played much Total War before, you can take a quick look at the unit roster and know straight away what works against what. And with a little bit of experience, you can start to understand that and make your own strategies, right? So there's a very clear rock, paper, scissors mechanic between units. And the second thing is, for the hardcore guys, the people who've played a lot of Total War games in the past, the real strategy and the real depth comes in combining these units and building armies. So creating armies that really kind of work best against your opposition. So if you come up with an opposition and he's got hundreds of cavalry and loads of archers, what exact kind of army do you need to build to destroy him, right? And in addition to that, like I say, there's an element of playing your faction. So you need to know what faction you are, what their bonuses and kind of achievements and advancements are, and play to those strengths and kind of exploit the weaknesses of your enemies. So there's a lot of depth and strategy in there, but it's a lot more, I guess it's a lot simpler on top and deeper to master. That's the idea.
What are some of the other new features that we can see in the new Total War game?
Well, one of the major advancements in terms of the basics is obviously the graphics. We've done a huge amount with the graphics engine. I mean, you saw it for yourself. You know, it's another level above what we've been able to achieve before. It's huge. In terms of gameplay and stuff like that, we've got some really interesting stuff going on. Obviously, the diplomatic system has been overhauled, so you'll see some new stuff there. But in addition, the way that the battles fight and the way that the battles work, it's a return to the melee system. So for everybody that loved all the hand-to-hand combat of our old games, games like Rome and Medieval. This is very much a return to that roots, but it's a return to those roots with the technology that we've developed over these last few years of doing Empire and Napoleon. So you now get that awesome melee combat with all of the kind of new tech that we've got in the engine. So the physics systems are all upgraded, the charging animations and everything else. You'll see a lot more proper kind of, you know, hand-to-hand melee combat in your game, which is really good fun. And of course, the other major technical addition is the introduction of land into the sea battles. So now when you're fighting your kind of battles with your ships, you've got these giant reefs and rocks and coastlines and stuff, and all of that adds a layer of strategy and tactics to the game. So there's a lot in there that's different, a lot.
Tell me a bit about the siege dynamic or the castle fights. How do they work? Because they're, as you said, their architecture is a bit different to European castles.
Yeah, I mean, the way I described it before, and definitely the way we look at it from a design principle, is they're like wedding cakes, okay? So you've got layers of castle, right? And the way it used to work in Europe was, right the way up to Napoleon, you had big stone walls, and the defender sat behind them, and the attacker was stuck outside. The defender has two options: wait for the attacker to get in, or go out and attack the attacker. The attacker has another two options: go over the wall or go through the wall, and that was it, right? Whereas in Japan, the way it works is you have courtyards, alleyways, runs, defense towers, various different kind of zones of control, if you like, within a castle structure. And the defenders very often used to just open the doors and say to the attackers, well, come on in. If you think you're hard enough, come and have a go, see if you can beat us. And these guys used to have to basically funnel themselves through these kind of murderous alleyways with arrows coming down on top of them, and, you know, infantry pushing them from the front, and they get bottlenecked from behind as well. All of these different strategies and tactics kind of come into play in castle sieges in Japan, so they're very, very different to the kind of stuff we've done ever in Total War games.
Speaking from the technical point of view, during the presentation you told us, you know, in order to record the footsteps, you had guys come in that actually wore the shoes they wore back then, and then had to walk them through the mud with everything to capture the sounds. The same thing with the horses, and you also had guys doing motion capturing. I mean, that seems to me very, very elaborate for a real-time strategy game. Isn't it hard to then make a profitable game, because that's got to cost a shitload of money? And will it ever stop to be, you know, so elaborate in development?
You sound like a publisher. That's what. Will it ever stop? It's so expensive. Okay, it doesn't. As long as you've got the right business processes, it doesn't cost that much, right? I say it doesn't cost that much, of course it's millions of pounds, but it's very much based around like proper parallel processing in the studio. So with the right development pipeline, identifying your dependencies, you know, working out who needs to do what before other people can start on other things, means that you can prioritize the project properly. Yes, a lot of love, care, money and attention goes into making this realistic. I mean, our big goal with kind of Total War games is that we set history up as best we can for you. So that first turn, the minute you get into the game, it's the world that it should have been in that period. And from there on in, you do whatever the hell you want, right? So no war has to happen unless you choose to fight it. No alliance has to be made unless you make it happen. All of these things, you go ahead and play a what-if simulator with. And that's what we've always wanted to do with these Total War games, is to create an awesome, accurate set of history and then let players just go through it as a what-if generator, you know? And that's our aim, you know? That's why we spend that money. It's why we spend that time, to make it as realistic and as cool as possible. So it's just that much more fun to play around with.
What can we expect in multiplayer?
Multiplayer, we got some very big plans, right? So we're not ready to talk about all of them yet, but what I can say is that all of the kind of stuff you've seen in Napoleon most recently, so multiplayer campaigns, you know, you've got kind of like drop-in battles, you've got your land battles and sea battles. These are the kind of things that you can most, you know, reasonably expect to see in Shogun 2. But we have a number of very big multiplayer differences coming in. I can't say too much about that now. What I can say is I'll drop the word kind of persistence with you, and kind of like a larger game world, but I'm going to leave it at that and just let it go there. But there are some very big multiplayer options coming, yeah.
Coming back to the single player, you also showed us basically like a hero unit, like a general unit. I forgot the Japanese name, of course, unfortunately, of the unit, but can you tell us a bit about that one?
Yeah, sure. So each of the clans has a daimyo, right? And the daimyo is the head of a clan, so he's like the family leader, okay? He's also a general on the battlefield, so if you want, you can use him in battle. Of course, it's a big risk. If he gets killed, you've lost the leader of your faction. But again, like I say, these guys are great generals, okay? As well as that, you have generals, and these guys are kind of like your senior military figures, and they lead your armies in the field, and they have personalities and traits. In addition to that, you have hero units. Now, hero units are often misunderstood. People think of them as kind of mythological, sort of, like Japanese myth characters, whereby they turn up on the battlefield and, in kind of an awesome sort of karate, sort of samurai style, they destroy everything in front of them. That's not the way it works. They're more like master masters of a given style, and they have a number of disciples surrounding them, and they kind of use their style, but they're still very much human, and they're still mortal. If you use them wrong, like for example, if you have a, I don't know, an archer hero, and you stand him out in the middle of, you know, nowhere, shooting up at the enemy, he'll get ploughed down by horses, right? So you have to be careful about using these guys. They're not invincible, they're not one-man armies. But there's a lot of diversity there, a lot, between the daimyos, the generals, the heroes, and all the normal rank and file units. So you'll find there's a lot of cool stuff going on, like I say.
Have you guys ever thought about making this game for consoles as well?
Yeah, console Total War is something we constantly look at and constantly revisit. Obviously, every kind of new generation of console technology that comes out is examined by our R&D guys basically, and we look into it and kind of go, okay, is it possible? Is it possible? The magic nut on console is control, right? So a lot of games have tried. I mean, you know, I know we've spoken about this before, but like you've got games like, you know, End War, Halo Wars, and various others that have tried to do RTS on console. It's not yet happened, right? But it's very much waiting for that GoldenEye moment. So the point at which everyone went, you can't do FPS on console. GoldenEye happens, Halo happens, yeah, and everyone goes, oh crap, that's actually possible. Why didn't we do that all the time? You know, kind of RTS on console needs that same revolution. It needs that one product that comes out and goes, this is how you do it, and everyone goes, oh yeah, my god, we're so stupid, and then they go ahead and do it that way. You know, we are working, you know, always towards the goal of seeing if we can find that magic nut, and if we do, then yeah, you may well see it on console.
So you guys might be the ones to pop the cherry of the RTS genre on the console?
What a lovely way to put it. Yeah, we'll gangbang the console as the entire development staff. No, it's I think, like I say, if we find it, we'll use it. We're still looking, but you know, so at the moment there's no plans for Total War on console in the sense of, you know, yeah, there's a release and all the rest of it, but we are always looking.
Okay. So when can we expect Shogun 2 to be released?
2011. We're not able to give a date on it yet, and I'm keenly aware that one of my publishers is holding the camera, so it's all on time. It's 2011. You'll see it in 2011.
Thank you. Da habt ihr das gehört, im Jahre 2011 soll das Spiel dann rauskommen. Das, was ich bis jetzt gesehen habe, sieht sehr, sehr beeindruckend aus. Grafisch wirklich eine absolute Wucht. Da kann man sich auf jeden Fall schon mal drauf freuen. Nachtkämpfe gibt's, es gibt Naval Battle, alles Mögliche ist mit dabei. Also ich freue mich drauf und wir werden das sicherlich weiterhin beobachten und hoffen, dass wir natürlich bald auch mal was Spielbares in den Händen halten dürfen.
Wunderbar, Dankeschön.